We've got, please welcome back to the program. We have Dr. John Edeen from Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, and he's also the Chief Surgeon of Arms Room Radio.
Hey, well, it's good to be with you guys.
Dr. John, welcome back to the program. It's always great to have you on. And you know what, Earl, we're pushing Dr. John today. We got him playing politician John today, legislative update John today also, as opposed to Dr. John.
He's a man who wears many hats.
He does, just not all in surgery because you don't want them falling off.
No.
Yeah, we don't want them getting all sweaty and nasty either.
Doctor, tell us what's going on. It's been a couple weeks since we had you back on the program, and I know one of the things that we wanted to jump in with is you had a couple of legislative updates there out of Texas we wanted to jump on first, and then we'll get into, I'm sure, DRGO and a couple other events that we can talk about.
Sure. Well, the Texas legislature meets every other year from January to the end of May. So they got to get all their business in 5 months.
Okay.
Every other year.
Yeah, they only meet every other year. Yeah.
Right. So in a way, that's kind of good because they can't pass too much crap to dump on us. However, when we're trying to undo crap, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And so that's where we're at. So we did manage to undo some things. The first thing actually isn't with firearms, but it's actually a knife bill that was passed. And so we eliminated illegal knives.
Okay.
And that was HB 1935. And essentially what it does is it's taken the term illegal knife out of the law. The only place that we kind of had to compromise, I guess, was a knife 5.5 inches long cannot be carried in certain places like hospitals and schools and nursing homes and things like that, churches. But otherwise, now knives can be carried anywhere in the state.
Yeah, I guess I get that because a knife 5 inches or over, 5.5 inches or over, that's more of in my mind, like a fixed blade, like a bayonet or a Bowie knife or something.
Hunting
knife.
Yeah, it's like
that's more of an outdoorsy knife,
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
right. In Texas, it is a Bowie knife, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're thinking of.
Yeah.
A 5.5 inch blade folding knife, that's going to fill up a pocket
that's
really
quick.
quick.
That's a big knife, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big knife, and I think it's mostly really fixed blade knives that they're talking about. And really, so, okay, we can give him that one at this stage of the game. Of course, we're still disarmed in hospitals, and that's something that didn't go anywhere this year. There was a bill for that. There was also a bill that didn't go anywhere, which was kind of an interesting bill, and that was allowing concealed carry holders to carry anywhere police officers can carry.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was zero, though. That didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, figures.
That got stopped. Okay. So again, this is the difficulty of getting laws passed in the state of Texas. The other thing that they did that was pretty good was they passed a law where they reduced the fee for the license to carry from $140 for a new license to $40. And so that's pretty good. I think renewals are about the same, so they're not as expensive. Being a veteran, before this law passed, I only paid $75 for every 5 years for renewal. So that wasn't too horrible.
Right.
But they brought the cost down, and I think that's fine. I think that's good because, let's face it, all these gun control laws are basically to disarm those people that we don't want to have guns, that, and it's the racist roots of gun control.
Right.
And these are laws that, discriminate against poor and the inner city people. John Lott talks about this all the time, that the gun control schemes are and the licensing and the fees and all that kind of stuff price a lot of poor people out of the market. And so they can't afford to get their license to carry, and they can't afford to get their, say in some states, their firearms ID card and go through all the rigmarole that it takes. And so it disarms them, and so they're left vulnerable.
It's akin to a poll tax. It's how do we keep the people, how do we keep the poor, how do we keep the minorities away from doing the things that we don't want them to do? Well, let's just make it unaffordable for them. Like voting or exercising your Second Amendment right. And John, I'll ask you while we got you here: are there any other rights in under the Constitution that you have to pay to have in Texas there?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think we have any poll taxes.
Right.
Let's see. We don't have a tax to speak. We don't have a tax to go to church. So, no, I think this is the only one, really.
That's pretty much it.
That I can think of anyway offhand. I may be wrong, but, hey, and so moving on, there is another good bill that got passed, and that was one that's kind of in anticipation of passage of the NFA, the Suppressor Act.
Correct. The Hearing Protection Act, yeah.
Right, the Hearing Protection Act, and that it's making it legal to own all these things without an NFA approval.
Gotcha.
So short barrel rifles, and they also recently they come up with these short shotguns with the bird's head grip on them, and like there's a Mossberg, and there's there's a Remington. Well, we also made sure that there was verbiage in the law that makes those legal as well, and so those will be absolutely legal in Texas. And I've shot one of those actually. One of my friends who's an instructor for Suarez International, they make their own version of that. He had one, and we were able to shoot that, and it's kind of an interesting gun. It's not as horrible as you think it is. Shooting a 12 gauge with a bird's head.
Nice.
It's not like a pistol grip. It's very different. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So that's a good thing that we got passed through.
Well, that's neat. So Texas is pretty good with being proactive about. Well, listen, this law is on the horizon. You don't want to have lag time on the back end when it's legal federally. You don't want to still be sitting there statewide going, well, we can't do it. At least this way it takes those restrictions away now.
And we have to wait for 2 years for the next session to kick in. So that's the other thing, So they're trying to be preemptive. So if it gets passed within the next 2 years, well, then we're already ready to go. We're good to go.
Right.
So. A couple other things that they passed this year was Senate Bill 263, which makes it so that you can use calibers less than 32 calibers to take your license to carry test. So you can shoot a 22 or a 25 caliber gun now, rather than needing a 32 or greater.
Wait a second. Now, hold on. What is this test you speak of? You have to take a test to exercise your right? That sounds like another poll tax.
Well, it is. It's part of the license to carry that you have to actually pay somebody to give you a 4-hour course.
Right.
And that was lessened. That was lessened the last session. It used to be, I think, if it was 8 or 6. It was a couple days course that you had to take and do the shooting proficiency test, and that's what we're talking about, the shooting proficiency test, which is a B-27 target, which is Shaquille O'Neal sized person,
exactly,
or my sized person
with the hand on the hip, all of that. Yeah, I know the target
exactly.
The stereotypical silhouette.
Yep.
Yeah, and most of the shots are within 7 yards, so I mean, it's not very hard to pass the test.
John, can you hang out with us for another segment? We're coming up on a break. Let me do this.
Sure.
And I want to talk to you some more. We've got some other stuff. I think we got some stuff from last week. Earl's just nudging me. We want to follow up with you on, see if you had any opinions on this, and maybe we could go into that a little more in depth with hospitals. Obviously, being a doctor, you're probably familiar with hospitals. So stick around, folks. We've got Dr. John Edeen coming back with us when we get back from the break. You're listening to Arms Room Radio, coming to you live from the Kel-Tec studios. We'll see you in a few. Line with us, we have Dr. John Edeen from Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. That's drgo.us. That's drgo.us. And when we left off last segment, we were talking about requirements to get the firearms in, to get your license in Texas, and the updates that have come to that. And then, John, that's where I cut you off because we had to go to the commercial.
All right. Well, the next thing that was something interesting that they did is allowing the classroom portion of the license to carry class to be done online. So now you're going to be able to do your classroom portion online, and then you just have to do that shooting part with an instructor. So that makes things a little bit easier. That facilitates things.
John, I'm curious. I know from some of the states. I don't have a Texas license. I've got from a couple other states. What I see from a lot of them is when you do your course of instruction, if you've never had any firearms training before, you have to come and do the state's concealed weapons instruction. And in a lot of the states I see, it's if you're a veteran with a honorable discharge, if you're a former law enforcement officer, if you've taken the 80-hour security officer block or whatever it is, they exempt you from that. All you have to do is show the paperwork. Is that similar in Texas, or does Texas do that a different way?
In fact, that same bill we were talking about, that's part of it, was it exempts active military personnel and veterans who have received firearms instruction as part of their service within the last 10 years be exempt from the range instruction portion of the class. So that happens here as well. So
now that's the range
portion. So they're trying
portion.
to streamline. Yeah, the range part. Yeah, you're exempt from the range part if you're active duty military or have had firearms training in the last 10 years in the military.
And that makes sense. Listen, you've got the firearms familiarization.
Sure.
What we see a lot of places is, like in again, we'll just use Florida for an instance. Florida doesn't have that large shoot a firearm. You have to show proficiency, and they define that as pulling the trigger on one live round. Now, they don't care if it's into the ground or into a bucket of sand at the convention center during the gun show. That's okay for them, evidently, even though it's incredibly unsafe. But that's the state, and you know how it is. The people that make the gun laws don't understand the guns. But we always say, listen, come audit the class. Even if you have the waiver because you were military, audit the class, because the class is mostly the law and when you can and when you can't shoot. And they do the same thing for if you have an NRA hunter certificate. You don't have to take the classroom portion, which is really strange because, again, you know how to shoot that deer and what days of the week you could shoot it on or what kind of deer you can shoot, but you're exempt from now having to take the law to get your concealed weapons permit.
That's what I tell a lot of the veterans that come into the shop here is Uncle Sam taught you how to shoot, but he didn't teach you anything about Florida law, so I still recommend taking a class somewhere if you can.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes perfect sense to me. I think that knowledge is important to know where and when you can carry and when you should and shouldn't use the gun. And even that is inadequate. 4 hours in Texas of training is not enough as far as I'm concerned. You and I probably both agree that we all need additional training beyond the concealed carry classes and things like that.
Well, John, I know we've talked about this at length before, offline, where I'm a training guy like you are. Listen, you've got some training coming up this weekend. You're going to be doing some awesome training. I've obviously big into the training with military law enforcement background, civilian side. I know Earl sits here and we do it together. Yet I'm always troubled when I cross it over with the Second Amendment, and I don't see where the training requirement is in the Second Amendment. But I know you have to have a balance. But the constitutionalist in me says, okay, you know what? You're not a convicted felon. Here's your firearm. But my only comfort in that is, like you just mentioned, when you get the firearm, you realize it's the old Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
When you get the gun, you start taking more training. We saw that in the states that went to constitutional carry. The instructors thought, well, there goes my business. I'm never going to be able to teach anybody again. And all the classes are continually full because people now that have the responsibility want to get the training.
Right.
But sorry, that's just a little sidebar. I know we've talked about that ad nauseum.
And while Mike's on the sidebar, Dr. John, I want to get your input on one of the bills in Kansas where they're continuing to exempt public hospitals from allowing concealed carry. Have you heard on that? What's your input?
Yeah, I heard it. In fact, I listened to the show from last week when it came out on Tuesday night.
Hey, we're up to 16 listeners
16,
now.
16, baby, 16.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, and one in Texas. How do you like that?
All right.
But anyway, the fact that hospitals are exempt from concealed carry, to me, just puts a big bullseye on them. Just like schools, the bad guys, the criminals, the crazy people, the terrorists, they're smart. They plan things out. They are meticulous. They pick places where they're not going to have resistance. And hospitals are already violent enough, okay? I wrote an article a few years back talking about, how hospitals, I think 10% workplace violence happens in hospitals, according to OSHA.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 10 to 12%. I can't remember the exact number, but it's a pretty significant number when you look at all the workplaces there are around. And why is that? It's because you have crazy people or sick people or people who are not in their right mind, who are under a lot of stress. They feel that it's okay to punch a nurse or to swing at a technician or, act out. I mean, we had that incident about a month ago in Illinois, where a nurse was taken hostage by a prisoner who took the sheriff or the deputy's gun,
right,
and held her at gunpoint and actually ended up raping her. That didn't come out initially, but we finally heard later on that that's what happened.
Right.
He raped her, and the security guards ran the other way, and the cop ran the other way.
Yeah.
So
you know why they ran the other way?
Perfect argument.
John, you know why they ran the other way?
That guy had a gun.
Yeah, exactly right. The guy had the gun and they didn't.
Yeah,
exactly. He took the gun from the cop, and the security guards didn't have guns.
That's right. So this is not security as far as I'm concerned. A security guard without a gun is not security. It's a safety monitor. Remember that TV commercial?
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, I'm not a security guard. I'm a safety monitor.
Yep.
My job is to tell you if we're getting robbed. We're getting robbed.
John, let me ask on that Kansas law, because they made a point in there, and I'm paraphrasing it, but the administrators and the liberal, the pro-gun control crowd said if they have these guns in the hospital, they won't be able to get qualified staff that want to work there.
Well, they may be able to get the right kind of qualified staff, people like me. Okay, I certainly consider myself qualified staff, and I would be very happy to work in a hospital that allows concealed carry. In fact, I would push for training and the concealed carry people that work there to be trained like in the FASTER program in Ohio and now in Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's the model that we need to follow as far as I'm concerned, so that we get not only trauma first aid training, and even in, medical centers, people are not trained in trauma first aid. Now, the ER doctors are, and some of the trauma surgeons and the general surgeons and orthopedic surgeons and, ENT guys do airway stuff. They're trained in trauma.
Right.
But not everybody is. And, those nice tourniquets aren't located all over the place. I carry one on my ankle or I carry one in my bag, but, they're not in stations along the hallways. They're,
Right.
You may be able to get a blood pressure cuff and use that as a pneumatic tourniquet, and we use those in the operating room, something like that.
Right.
But, wouldn't it be nice to have the equipment pre-staged on each floor and on, to have, in case something did happen. I mean, they have crash carts all over the place, but they don't have the tourniquets for bleeding and, So, I mean, it's an expense, but it's something that we need to look at.
Yeah, lack of foresight. We say it all the time. Why don't they offer, the veterans or the former law enforcement the opportunity to take some training and be able to at least carry conceal inside there to make people feel better? But that's just me. That's just one man's opinion.
Yeah,
John, we've run up against the clock once again. Love having you on the program. I hope you could join us back soon. How could people stay in touch with you? How could people see what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm at drgo.us. And you can also find us on Facebook at Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, and also I think on Twitter, which is I think DRGO/SAF if I'm not mistaken. So, but you can get a hold of me. Just go through the website at DRGO.
Dr. John, thank you for joining us once again.
Keep your scalpels and your knives sharp, and your mind sharper.